Good everyone, and welcome to the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce's Work at Home Wednesday call. I'm Deborah Hooper, the COO for the Chamber, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. We would love to have you also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us at GSO Chamber for the latest information. We're also going to continue to send out a post-call communication to our members with the recording of the call and any relevant links. If you're not a member and you've joined us today, welcome. We're so glad that you're on the call, and please know that all links to the resources and the recordings will be on our website at greensboro.org/COVID-19. Finally, there is one really important thing that I want to ask everyone to do for me, and that is, if you have not yet, please complete your 2020 U.S. Census form. We really would love to get 100% completion rate so that North Carolina and Guilford County in particular, so that we get the number of congressional seats and the amount of federal funding that we need and deserve. And that's especially going to be relevant as we come out of this post-COVID period. I also want to thank our Circle of Champions partners. They really support our programming throughout the year and, in fact, enable us to bring programming like our daily action calls to you today. At the platinum level, we have a Legacy Federal Credit Union, Cone Health, Lincoln Financial Group, Truliant Federal Credit Union, and VF Corporation. At the gold level, we have Navant Health, and at the silver level, we have Global Brands Group, Kelly Office Solutions, Ralph Lauren, Staunton Capital, and Wake Forest Baptist Health. So we thank all of them. Well, today we have a terrific work at home topic teed up for our guest speaker, Gary Fly, on how to sell through social distancing. I do want to remind everybody on the call, please put your questions in the chat room, and Gary's going to be glad to answer them after he shared the presentation that he's prepared for us today. So I want to introduce Gary to you. He is the Chief Marketing Officer for the Brooks Group. He grew up in Atlanta and has been in Greensboro since 1999. He previously owned a consulting practice, Performance CXO. Gary graduated from Georgia Tech with a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and has an MBA from Vanderbilt University. He is an experienced, knowledgeable speaker, folks. He is a regular lecturer at UNC Greensboro's Bryan School on Entrepreneurship, Sales, and Marketing. And he started speaking to Rotary groups as the winner of the Piedmont Business Ethics Award. He does have what is a very interesting and appropriate passion for this part of the country. Gary is a certified barbecue judge. So Gary, I tell you, that is an awesome passion to have, especially being right here in Greensboro, North Carolina. I think we're going to have to connect you with Cecilia Thompson for maybe a Try It Tuesday conversation about that passion of yours.
Oh, that'd be fun. Sure.
Well, today we want you to share your expertise on how to sell through social distancing. Every business owner, manager, leader knows that we cannot save our way to success. And, we have to be able to generate sales, which generates cash, which, as we all know, is the lifeblood of any business, any nonprofit. So whether you're a business person who's on the call today or you're a nonprofit leader, this topic is relevant, and I think the information that you're going to share is going to help all of us. So Gary, let's get started. How do we do this? How do we sell remotely from our homes and our virtual world these days and do it successfully?
Yeah, so it's a very different world, and Deborah, we agree wholeheartedly that companies, businesses, all enterprises are going to have to sell their way out of this, right? And it's going to be different. We've adopted the mindset that all businesses right now are in kind of a startup mode because the way we've done business is not likely the way we're going to be doing business. And so it's a chance for us to really think about how we go to market and how we sell. And so what I intended to do today really is to help, is to talk through what we do. We're a sales training organization. I've been in business in about 40 years here in Greensboro. We've trained over 1 million salespeople, and we practice what we preach. So I thought I would just kind of pull back the cover a little bit and talk through some of that. And I hope through those examples, people can get some real actionable takeaways. It is really my hope today that people listening can have a few tactical things that, leaving this call, they can start to implement that maybe will help them as we work to sell our way through this. And so the first part of the presentation is going to be built a little bit around our response and what we're doing. Then the second thing I want to do is talk a little bit about some very particular tips. We have a model, a sales model, that we call IMPACT, and it's an acronym, and it stands for investigate, meet, probe, apply, convince, and tie it up. And that's the process of selling that we teach. And so I want to spend time on the first three, which really are prospecting, positioning, and communicating. So I'll share tools, I'll share some very specific examples of that. And there'll be on these slides, like there's a slide with the top 10 things to do before a call and those sorts of things. I'm going to go through those pretty quickly and not touch on necessarily all 10, but I'll make this presentation available to anybody that wants it. And there's information at the end on how to get it. But I really wanted to broach the broader topics and then give a few examples for people to take hold of. So that's really how I plan on going about it.
Terrific. Let's get going.
All right. So here's what we've done. We actually have been in the virtual selling business for many years. So we have built our business selling virtually to a large degree. So fortunately, we were in a good position in terms of having the tools and the techniques and all that down. But we recognized early on we didn't want to come across as tone deaf, meaning people weren't really ready to buy. Is what we're kind of finding, right? That everybody was trying to figure out what's going on. So while we had the tools, we didn't think it was necessarily appropriate. So the first step that we did was to get really close to our clients, and with a different sort of posture. So we directed our sales team and really our whole team to say, hey, look, we want to be transformational, not transactional for the near term. Going back to the idea that we wanted to, that all companies are kind of reinventing themselves, and companies maybe didn't want to make big financial commitments, but we wanted to deliver the message that we understand the world is upside down right now. We want to be a partner and walk with you through this, and we want to help you transform your business based on kind of what we've done with our own business. So we really took a very different sort of mindset that I think helped us get close to our clients. We called all of our current clients, talked to them about what they were seeing in the marketplace, and asked them, for kind of where they were, what was going on, what their challenges were, and the like. Based on that, we built out a library of tools for clients and non-clients. A good number of these are free, and they're available on our website. If you go to our homepage, there's a orange Go Virtual button up at the very top. And that takes you to the page with these resources. But we thought, well, heck, we have the ability to help people. Let's do that. And then that led us to this idea of playing the role of convener. So we now, in fact, right now, going on at 3:00, we are hosting 5 leadership forums. These are lightly facilitated groups of 8 sales leaders. And all we're doing is bringing people together to let them talk about what they're experiencing in their world, ask questions, take advice from one another. So it's a peer advisory group. And I'll tell you, that has been as powerful as anything that we've done in terms of helping us establish relationships with our clients, but also understanding the sentiments of the marketplace. And we did not anticipate how powerful or helpful that has been. But I think anything you can do to convene your clients together, to help them understand the world, what's going on, is powerful. I think the last thing we've done is we've surveyed the marketplace. So we actually have a research center as part of the Brooks Group. And for the last 6 weeks, we've gone out and asked sales leaders questions about what they're experiencing. And so we're using that to inform our understanding of how is this thing unfolding, what sort of tools and resources do sales leaders need right now. But that's really kind of the response that we've had to it. I don't know if that, I hope that positions at least a few ideas among people.
Absolutely. I know our Motivation Monday, where we've played the role of convener, we've seen some similarities with what you've done as well. People love that.
Yeah, they really do. One of our clients is a manufactures equipment for facilities, and a big part of what they do is they go into facilities and they train on it, and they're not able to do that. So based on one of their experiences in one of our forums, they started convening some of their non-competing clients to talk about best practices around the machinery and what they're doing in their downtime. And they kind of agreed that, it was an unexpected benefit, but it drew them in closer to their clients. So that's how we're doing it. So I mentioned the surveys. These are just a couple of the questions that we've asked that I thought were interesting. And I'll actually start with the question on has this had effect on you and where you should be in terms of your sales right now? You can see the first week we did it, 21% of the people said it had it, and now that's gone down to 8% of the people. And then you can see the bottom two numbers, if you combine those have gone from 71 to 86%. So clearly people have started to feel the impact, right? There was a little bit of lag, and you'll see on the bottom one that there's not clarity really around how long do people think this is going to last. And the reason we ask that is because we believe that there's a ramp up time on the sales side that you need to take. So if you think this is a 3-week deal, you need to start planning now for the emergency. If you think this is a 9-month deal, then you're going to behave differently. But we present these survey results every Friday afternoon at 2:00 on a free webinar. Again, information's on the website. Happy to share it with anybody that's interested. A couple of other interesting things that have come out. We've asked people what they've done differently or what kind of practices they've implemented. You can see a vast majority of them have said maintain structured work hours. I'm going to speak to that a little bit more in a little bit, but we think that that's absolutely critical, is to provide structure around it, because it's so easy to kind of come in and out of your daily office, your home office, and maybe not have the structure around your work schedule. And then we asked the sales leaders, what are they doing differently? And you can see that this idea of introducing new training and holding periodic discussions are something they're doing. Again, we believe that that's absolutely critical. In fact, internally, what we're doing is that we now have an 8:00. At 8:00 in the morning, we have a sales meeting and a marketing meeting. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One is it convenes everybody together at the beginning of the day. So frankly, you kind of know everybody's up and about and doing things. But it also allows for us to have conversations about what they see and what's going on. We now also end the day with feedback from our sales team and our client experience team, the project managers. And we ask them, what are they hearing from clients? Are clients trying to push their engagements, or just what's going on? And again, we found that real-time data gathering to be very helpful. So those are some of the things that we're doing to try to establish new routines and also to collect good data from them. So we've had big results from those slight changes. The other thing we think is really important is routines and the power of routines. And there were some interesting studies done on how routines help free up mental bandwidth for us. So if we have a routine down and we're not having to think about things, it frees up time. I've read where Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and even President Obama would have very regimented dressing. They had certain things that they would wear because they didn't want to burn energy thinking about that. They wanted to burn energy thinking about important things. So routines are important. And we've also found evidence that in this time, isolation can really physically change the brain. I think, I don't know what the audience is experiencing, but it is odd to be now 6 weeks into working from home. And so routines help to to counterbalance these things and make people feel a part of something, and also help make sure that we're productive. So we think, again, with our team, this is what we've instructed them to do, and this is what we've done internally. We design our routines around set working hours. We expect people to be working kind of during traditional hours. We try to keep the cadence of the day in line with kind of our natural circadian rhythms and the like. Actually, Daniel Pink has written a really fascinating book about this whole subject called WHEN, W-H-E-N. So if you're interested, I would recommend that to anybody listening. And then doing some basic planning, right? Every day we talk about what are the top 3 things for next day. There's a book called Eat the Frog, which talks about do the most undesirable task that you have in a day that morning, our first thing. And then we need to block out time, control email, and provide daily recaps. So I don't know that any of that's earth-shattering, but we try to be very comprehensive in the way we bring it together and intentional about the way we've brought it into the Brooks Group.
Now, I think these are great suggestions and good reminders if we're not doing things like this already.
Right, because it's just easy as everybody kind of starts to separate. You lose some of this stuff. So we find that you have to be much more intentional about it and put energy around it, or it does not happen. The other things that we've done, I mentioned the 8 o'clock meetings and the daily recap, which is very simple. It's not a complicated form. It's just, hey, I talked to this client and they said this, that sort of thing. But on Friday afternoons at 3 o'clock, we have a weekly, what we call breakdown of the week. And really all we do there, again, because we've gone from where we're all in one space now to everybody being different, and you lose some communication. So the project management team doesn't necessarily know what the sales team's doing, and the marketing team has launched a bunch of initiatives that nobody else knows about. So we have a 30-minute huddle on Friday afternoon that's really kind of low-key, a little bit, we keep it upbeat and positive, but it's just to share information. Again, we find that those things have been invaluable. All right. So it leads us now into some tactics and tools. And I often have gotten the question, is this here to stay? Well, it was happening before the pandemic. This is a survey that Salesforce.com did, and it shows an uptick in virtual selling in general since 2015. I think that we've all seen now that people have been effective. We've got work at home down pretty good. Folks are much more comfortable on Zoom calls. So our bet is that 12% is going to rise pretty dramatically. And while there will be a return to some in-person stuff, and there will be a return to business as usual in some ways, virtual selling is really here to stay. So having a good foundation in it, we believe, is going to be critical, and we know it's absolutely critical for anybody trying to sell their way out of the current pandemic. So where does that lead us? Well, first, the basics are you got to have the right tools. We use Zoom. We've been pleased with it. I know there's been some press out there about Zoom, but we like it. It works well for our company. We also use a service called Gong, G-O-N-G.io, which records our calls. And so we train our salespeople based on that. We listen to them, and it measures things like the amount of time we're talking versus the amount of time a potential client's talking, and those sorts of things. And it's, again, been invaluable. But you have to have the right tools. Again, you have to be intentional about it. What sort of IT structure do you have? How long are your calls going to be? What sort of items are you going to be displaying? All that sort of thing. And then you have to prepare. So I think we've probably all seen some of the funny videos on people being bombed on their Zoom calls or doing things they didn't realize the camera was rolling. We stress this, and we actually talk about our office as being a little bit of a stage or a little bit of a theater, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a lady who deals with assessments largely, and in her office behind her camera is examples of her actual assessments, right? And so when she's talking to people, that's what they're looking at. So we actually stage our offices based on the fact that we know we're going to be spending time on Zoom. But it's basic things like this. The other thing that we're doing you'll see number one is prepare your client for video.
Yes.
So we send out a sheet to clients beforehand, telling them kind of our best practices and what to expect. But now we actually have producers on most of our calls, especially calls with multiple people. And we will have, so right now we're doing a virtual instructor-led training class that's going on this week, where we have 15 people in a class. Well, on Friday, we had an orientation with them. And we had our producer, who's there to handle technical issues and all that, kind of walk through it. But what we have found is having a producer on the calls allows the person conducting the calls to really pay attention and not be worried about the one person whose audio doesn't seem to be working or is trying to call in by the phone or their video, something's, and that's been a great little tool for us, or a great little, tool. So you'll see these are basic things. We really do talk about this regularly with our sales team. So even the basic things, I think, need to be reinforced regularly among professional sellers. The other thing we do is we talk about using web cameras. I mentioned that we use Gong, and this is a survey they did, but 41% more deals are closed with web cameras on. And we believe it's part of that connection. It helps build rapport. It helps build trust, all of those things. But this is just a little thing. Who would have thought that maybe would matter that much? But we find that it's important, and that's how we conduct business. All right, so some tools and tips. I mentioned the impact method, and we're going to talk about the first three: the investigate stage, the meet stage, and the probe stage. We're going to talk about investigate first, which is really around positioning and networking, prospecting, preparation, and planning. So we find that these are the basics. If they're in place, you have much better success closing deals and pursuing the right sort of deals than you would if you skip these steps. So, a few things to think about. I mentioned positioning. Some of these are kind of a play on words, but we think about it in these three terms. One is a global positioning system, and that is, how are you positioned against your competition? So you need to understand kind of how folks are perceiving you and how they perceive your competition. And one way to do that is to really understand your competition at a granular level. So once a month, we have a presentation on our competition where we go through their websites, we look at any kind of marketing materials that they have available. We really do a deep dive into understanding what are they talking about, how are they trying to differentiate themselves, how are they putting themselves forth in the marketplace. And then we do a little exercise around, okay, if you're sitting in front of a potential client and they say, oh, I'm also looking at company XYZ, how do you start to differentiate yourself? How are you prepared for that? And so we don't want to think about it for the first time when a potential client's asking about it. So there's work to do around that. Because of the internet, you can find out an awful lot of information, whether it be through their website or LinkedIn or if they're a public company, through their documents there. But that's an important exercise. Out of sight, top of mind, right? How do you stay top of mind when you can't be there visiting them, when you can't be having your typical meetings? Again, the things that we're doing we do a few things very diligently. One is we create lots of what we think is good content. We do that through these forums, through these surveys, through our research center, through interviews with past clients. But we generate multiple blogs and pieces of content every week that we send out in emails, that we put on our website, that we give to our sales team so that they can forward it. And we work very hard at that. And then we also do things on LinkedIn and the like. But we push an awful lot of what we hope is usable, valuable content out. We also have call schedules that we do based on clients and where they are in the journey, or if they've already become clients and whatnot. And then we've actually had great success, and it's a little harder right now, with direct mail. And I know that sounds crazy as we're talking about this virtual world, But in a given month, we typically send out about 60 to 70 what we call high impact mail pieces, which are some of our books and some of our collaterals. It's all tied into some theme. And we find that works really well. So when we're back in offices but not able to get meetings, those are some tools and tactics we use. The last thing is social media, right? So how do we use social media as we distance? Again, we think that it's a great platform to position ourselves as thought leaders, as trusted advisors, and it really allows us to build both a professional brand and a personal brand. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So brand positioning, mentioned earlier how we go through the diligence. We want to be thought of as thought leaders, as people that can bring real value to sales teams, and that are interested in this idea of helping sales teams transform. So that's what's important to us. We believe we've got a great platform for that. We want to convey that. So that's kind of our brand positioning. Personal positioning is, we think, at times equally important. I don't know about you or any of the viewers, but when I get any kind of inbound request for a meeting or any of that sort of thing, the first thing I do is go to LinkedIn, right? And I like, who is this person? What do I know about them? Do we have any shared friends? Any of that kind of stuff. And so I believe that we believe that personal positioning is absolutely critical. How does your image on LinkedIn look? Is there content out there about you on Facebook? If you Google yourself, is it good news or bad news, and all that? And it can be very important, and it's something that you can control pretty easily. So I use LinkedIn heavily, and can point. I always get the question, well, can you point to any business you've won from it? I can point to business that I won. But what I do is I use a tool called Hootsuite, which allows me to schedule all my posts at one time. And I use another tool called Flipboard, which is a news aggregator. So every Friday afternoon, I go to Flipboard that's curated articles that they think I'll be interested in based on my interests. And I'll select 5 of them and I'll schedule them for the next week. All mine go out at 8:20 in the morning. There's nothing magical about that. It's just a routine I built. So Friday, I spend about 30 minutes to an hour doing this and scheduling all this. And I'm amazed at how much feedback I get. So for example, on Monday, the one I pushed out was from Forbes, and it was around the PPP. And I've had 668 views of that and a number of comments. Most days I get 100+ views. Some days I get more than 1,000. And it's easy, and it's just a way to stay out in front of people, to provide something that I think they're getting of value, and it helps build that reputation of being a trusted advisor and a resource.
Gary, I think that's a really great point, and it also is a terrific reminder that we all need to be mindful to keep our LinkedIn profiles updated, and to really complete those profiles, right? So that we can help build our personal brands.
Yeah, I think that's critical. So that's that personal positioning. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because they'll be available, but we want to position ourselves as a strategic resource. So we're concerned about coming across as a trusted advisor. We want to have consultative meetings, and we want to have continued access to decision makers, right? So that's how we think about ourselves and our business. So we want to differentiate with insights, just as I mentioned. So we work hard on creating good original research, but we're also happy to share thought leadership that comes from other sources that maybe we didn't have anything to do with, other than that we like it and think it's of value. And then that all leads us to prospecting. And this is probably the hardest thing for salespeople. In this world, it's a little different. So I want to share a couple of stats with you. 44% of salespeople give up after 1 follow-up. The problem with that is 80% of sales require 5 follow-ups or more. It takes an average of 8 cold calls to attempt to reach a prospect. It takes 18 or more dials to connect with a prospect over phone. And 57% of emails consider message to be a spam if it isn't relevant to their needs, even when they know the vendor well. So I think about all the emails that the Brooks Group sends out. I don't know how many you all send out, but we send out a fair number of emails. And to think that 57% of them are probably thought of as spam is not where we want to be, right? So it's important to have good messaging in the subject line. It's important that the topic is topical and relevant to our desired audience. Adding new to the subject line increases open rates by 23%. Nurtured leads make 47% larger purchases, and customers are 4 times more likely to buy when referred from a friend. So that tells us, hey, if we can get good referrals and we have a good nurture plan, then we'll end up probably where we want to be. And we do that by building target lists and profiles. On the right, you'll see the tools that we use: LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Zoom Info, Scrap.io. LinkedIn Sales Navigator, if you're not familiar with it, we find it to be powerful. And there's actually ways, and we've got a video on our website on this, that you can get free trials to it pretty easily and try it out for about 90 days without paying for it. But I would recommend that. And then we have a lot of rules that we follow with email, because 57% of the people think it might be spam. And so it depends on the subject line and all of those sorts of things. So here's some best practices around email and around how to connect with people with cold calls and the like. The last thing we're doing is a fair amount of video prospecting, and we use a tool called Soapbox, which allows you to make videos on your computer. We do a lot of 1 to 2 minute videos, and what we find is it just provides a real personal touch. People seem to find, when they get an email from Gary at the Brooks Group or G-Fly at the Brooks Group, it's like, is there really a person there? But if a 1 minute video of me on Soapbox pops up, then they know, right? And so there's just a little bit more of a personal connection.
Gary, what do you put in? What is the content that you put in your video? What would be typical?
Yeah, so it really depends on where the client is in the journey or the prospect is in the journey. But for example, I mentioned that we do a lot of assessment work. And so it might be the person who runs our assessment group just talking about, hey, have you thought about, this sounds terrible, but do you have the right sales team to help you sell out of this pandemic? Here are some tools that might be helpful to understand their strengths and weaknesses and their natural inclinations to get you there.
Oh, okay.
That sort of thing. Or have you thought about virtual training? And if you have, here are the things we think are important. So as you're starting to evaluate different virtual training initiatives, here's some things for you to think about.
So it's relevant to your core competencies at the Brooks Group?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Exactly. And then, we've been talking about prospecting, but we also have to think about existing clients, right? And we believe that it's an appropriate time to start thinking about how are they going to be impacted by the pandemic, and what does that mean for them longer term? And does that change their needs for our kind of services? And so what does that change about the way we're talking about them, how we prioritize them, and whatnot? I also mentioned that we ask for referrals pretty aggressively because of this. We find that 83% of customers said they would give it, but only 29% of salespeople asked for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, the second step is the meat step, when that's engaging prospects, developing rapport, and building trust. I mentioned our assessments. I'm going to talk a little bit about those right now. One that we do is based on the DISC personality styles, and what we're trying to measure here is how do we approach problems, people, pace, and procedures. We also have, as a part of our assessment package, which is the Brooks Talent Index, we look at motivators, which are what drives us and what does not drive us. And then we look at a trait we call dimensional balance, which is a mental clarity and focus. But we think that it's important to understand the personality of style of yourself, but also the person you're trying to deal with, because that style determines how they like to communicate and the sorts of information that's going to be important to them. Again, this is all going to be available, but you can see, right, that on the DISC profile, the D is dominance. That person has a bias to action. They're self-confident. They're going to be independent and straightforward, right? So then how do you recognize that? Through virtual cues, if you will, voice, body language, email, etc. Well, again, for the dominant person, they're going to have strong communication. They're going to be confident. It's going to be fast-paced. maybe loud, abrupt, loud, or forceful. They're going to lean forward. They're going to use direct eye contact. In email, they're going to give you the 1 or 2 word responses, etc. Right? So we think, again, in the old world, we would often coach our sales team to look at a person's office and to see if it's organized or disorganized, and what kind of pictures do they have, and all that sort of thing. It's harder to do that now, so these are some of the tips that we give. And then they will ask you questions that can help determine their personality style. How much does this cost? Why is this the best option I need? Is this the best you can do? That sort of thing, right? So that starts to clue you in as a salesperson into what's important to them. And then you can start to tailor your response using particular types of words that will play right back to that, right? So that then they start to see, oh, they're starting to build trust with you. The rapport is starting because you're communicating in a way that fits with the way they communicate and like to receive information. And we believe this is important because, you get one chance to make a first impression, and in person, that's between 19 and 34 seconds, and by phone, it's 16 to 21. So if you can communicate in a way that resonates with them, you immediately establish yourself as somebody that they will pay attention to and be more inclined to listen to. So this whole idea of communicating based on the style of the person, again, we practice it and we preach it because we've seen it work. And then the last step that we talk about, or I'm going to talk about today, is the probe step. And that goes back to the communication, but it's starting around to ask the right questions, because what you want to do is uncover the prospect's real needs and wants. Oftentimes they may approach you with something that's actually maybe not the root cause of it, but you have to get to that. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing you do is you listen. As you'll see, when surveyed, buyers said that the first thing a salesperson can do to make the experience positive is to listen to my needs, and the second is not to be pushy, right? So we believe, again, that this goes back to communication styles and understanding that, but being mindful of yourself. And that's reinforced by another Gong.io study that says that the top reps in calls typically talk 40% of the time and listen 54% of the time. And you can see that the bottom reps talk 72% of the time and only listen 29 or 28% of the time. Again, we believe this is powerful sorts of information that allows you to train your sales team, or you as an individual seller. And you mentioned non-for-profits earlier, right? If you're having to pitch for funds and whatnot, it's the same process, right? It's a sales process is essentially what it is.
That's exactly right. I'm just sitting here, just going through this with you and thinking in terms of, the chamber is a nonprofit and how this applies to us. So Gary, you're exactly right. This absolutely applies to nonprofits as well.
Yeah, and I think, if you just think about it from a human level too, we kind of all appreciate this sort of thing, right? Nobody wants to be held prisoner by a sales rep or somebody soliciting funds that just talks 3/4 of the time and doesn't give you any airtime.
Exactly.
We've all experienced that. And then they've done a study on the number of effective questions that should be asked. And you can see that 74% of the top salespeople ask between 11 and 14 questions. Now, they have to be relevant. They have to be on point. It is not just a question for question's sake, but it really goes to how do you ask good questions? Well, you listen and you understand who you're talking to, right? So that you communicate in a style that's complementary to how they communicate. You understand who they are, what their problems are, and the like. And so we believe that, there's different sorts of questions. You have open-ended questions, closed-ended questions, and clarifying questions. And when done correctly, it gets you to a point where you're tailoring your questions based on your audience. Again, this is what we teach, but we believe that the role that a person plays in the organization really helps you as as a seller or a solicitor, understand the sorts of questions to ask. So if they're the owner, CEO, or president, they're going to have a little more of a strategic mindset, and they're going to be talking about progress towards longer term things. If they're admin or procurement or purchasing, those are more tactical and it's kind of day-to-day related stuff. So I've gone through that pretty quickly, but I hope the idea came through that, again, we believe understanding who you're communicating with and how they like to communicate is critical, and the ability to listen and ask good questions is really what establishes rapport, builds goodwill, and then allows the process to continue. So that's really, that's the items that I had that I wanted to cover. We believe firmly that the success will come if you set good routines, if you have the right tools, if you practice and rehearse. Mentioning that, we use Salesforce as our CRM, and in Salesforce we actually we will help our sales team. The sales leaders will listen to calls on Gong.io, and then there's a sheet in Salesforce that they fill out with coaching tips. So again, I talk about practice and rehearse. That is a drill that we actively do, and I don't think there's any substitute for it. Use your webcam, as basic as that sounds. Be intentional about positioning, understand your audience, and communicate appropriately. Listen, follow up, and ask good questions. So that's really it. If any of the viewers have an interest in this, they can send an email to marketing@thebrooksgroup.com. And I mentioned that we have these forums going on. If people are interested in that, it's forum@thebrooksgroup.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions if there's any out there, or just have a general discussion.
So Gary, while we give everybody a chance to put any questions that they have in the chat room, one of the questions that was on your survey this week for sales leaders and business leaders was also one that talked about collecting what you sell, right? What practices have you put in place to make sure that you're going to be able to collect what you sell? Which I thought was really a great question, because it really caused me to pause and go, oh, look at all these ideas. You all had put so many different ideas and then said, hey, check all the boxes that, for what you're doing. And I looked at them and I thought, okay, well, I can check that box. But some really great ideas that you shared about how to make sure that you're able to collect. And that's that cash generation we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you, Deborah, that really came out. So that came out of the survey, and then the convening our clients, and they're not all clients. I mean, we have just folks that have expressed an interest in them, and listening to those conversations, and that's starting to bubble up. We can tell you that sales leaders, that's becoming real for them. And they're starting to really think about that, because I think they're starting to see some delinquencies, and they're starting to see some challenges. Not only does that inform what's going on currently, but it helps them create some priority around the sort of clients that they're going to be looking for, or the sort of criteria that they're going to be measuring as they emerge post-pandemic.
Absolutely. So Gary, one question in the chat room right now, is IMPACT an acronym? And if so, what does it stand for?
It is. So the I is investigate, the M is meet, the P is probe, the A is apply, the C is convince.
Hey, how are you?
T is tie it up. And so,
oh yeah, I forgot you were calling too. I'm gonna keep the meeting going.
I think we have someone else on the call, yeah. Gary. So
yeah. So yes, it's an acronym, and it's the base of it's our methodology. It's what we teach. It's really the cornerstone program that we have, and it's designed to create a systematic approach to selling. And we find that it creates a common language inside of companies. It creates a methodology. So our CRM, we've actually aligned Salesforce to it. So we can look at how many potential clients are in the I step, how many are in the M step, how many are in the P step. and we report on that weekly. The sales team reports on it to the company every week, but it's a methodology that is an acronym.
Okay, Gary, here's a question from Tara Sandercock at the Community Foundation.
Oh, very good. Hey, Tara.
Yeah, Tara said this has been so helpful, you sharing these frameworks and techniques. Any particular tips for adapting to nonprofits that you would differentiate from what you shared?
So, I view the nonprofit world very similarly to the for-profit in terms of it. The key for you all is to build rapport and relationships, right?
Yes.
It's important for you to be able to explain the mission, to show the benefit and the results of it, and show why somebody might want to be associated with you, whether it's through a financial contribution or a volunteer opportunity or whatnot. So I think that the idea of your positioning is absolutely critical, both personal and the business, the nonprofit and your personal one. And really, I believe, again, my sense is that it's probably good to segment the people that you're talking to and by personality style in a lot of ways. So I'm on that DISC profile. I'm a very high I and a very high D, and I'm a very low S, which is the steadiness. So I tend to move very fast. I tend to want to just basic information, kind of give me the high points, and I don't need, if you give me a 5-page or 10-page kind of summary of what you're doing at the Community Foundation, I may not read it, right? But if you give me a 1-page kind of overview, I am. So I think having collateral pieces or pitch pieces or whatnot that sort of starts to divide that up is important, but really understanding who you're talking to, how they like to communicate, and how they process information, I think is very important.
All right, that is great advice, and oh so true. I don't see any other questions at this point, unless somebody's going to pop one in there as I wrap up. But Gary, thank you so much for sharing this great advice today. This absolutely is so relevant to what we are doing, obviously, to work remotely. And I agree with you that I think that we're going to see an increase in selling virtually as we go forward. We've been building a base of that work since 2015, as you have pointed out, but it's just ramped up, and it's going to continue to as well while we work our way through this period, but also beyond, because of what we are learning, right?
I think so. I think it will. We've done it for years and built a successful business on it, and you find some great efficiencies, quite frankly.
Absolutely.
In it. So yes, we think so. And Deborah, it's been a pleasure to be here. My information's on the PowerPoint, but people, if they're interested, can certainly reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions, happy to provide the information, and appreciate you including us. And I think this is a great forum that you all have going on. So congratulations on the success of this new initiative for you all.
Well, thanks, Gary. We appreciate that. And I agree with you. It's just been fantastic content today, and so relevant to what we all need to know and be able to use going forward, and all that we're learning about all the platforms that are available to us to be able to work remotely now. I think we've all learned a lot. So as a quick reminder to everyone, again, please, if you haven't completed your U.S. Census form, we encourage you to do so, and please encourage others to do so as well. It's super easy and super important to get that done. I do want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, and please join us again tomorrow at 3 o'clock. For Think Ahead Thursday, we have a double header. First, our CEO, Brent Christensen, will be speaking with Matt Martin, who is the Regional Executive with the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. Matt's going to share the Fed's perspective on the state of our economy, what they're keeping watch over right now, and how they're also helping to provide relief and support to businesses and nonprofits. And then right after Matt wraps up with Brent, Luann Flanders Stack, our Executive Vice President of Entrepreneurship for Launch Greensboro, will welcome Pam Jordan with Next Gen CFO, who's going to provide some guidelines on how to track the Paycheck Protection Program loan funding so that you can earn the forgiveness of a portion of your loan that is a key benefit of that particular relief option. So you will not want to miss that. So we're going to see you back here tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and have a great rest of your day.